Throw the slack, you fucking moron!
Force will be with you, always.
Everybody, welcome back to Screen Share, a movie podcast about... Hello, what have we here? I'm Adam
I'm
Cook.
Calder.
I was Lando.
Oh, it was. Interesting. I didn't know
that. Welcome back to the podcast. This is us continuing our first foray into the Fast and Furious and Star Wars films. Last week we did Too Fast, Too Furious. Things got
too fast.
a little
I'm too furious.
Too fast and too furious.
I think so. We made some mistakes last night, and
that's okay though.
Things happen.
We're in a more
Mordecai.
We're in Mordecai. So this episode we're doing Empire Strikes Back, which is one of the Star Wars films. Let me tell you a bit about it.
You're going at 100% right now, huh?
I don't know what happened. As soon as we started recording, my brain exited. Despite a strong victory against the Death Star, the rebellion is still on the run from the Galactic Empire as it increases its efforts to wipe out the rebellion once and for all. Our heroes face insurmountable odds as Han, Leia, Chewie, and C-3PO struggle to remain out of the Empire's reach. Meanwhile, Luke and R2-D2 seek out the guidance of prolific Jedi Grandmaster Yoda in hopes that Luke may become strong enough to defeat the evil Darth Vader. However, with the Empire looming around every corner, victory seems to fall further and further out of reach.
That's crazy.
Crazy.
Literally a crazy thing.
So this is like after A New Hope, Star Wars at the time. That was very much like a fun adventure. And this is more of a... this movie takes a bit more of a darker tone, which at the time was not actually received positively.
Yes, I saw.
Yeah, like a lot of people were like, why is it like darker and more serious? That kind of, the whole point of Star Wars is that it's like got whimsical charm and it's fun and it's a good goofy adventure. It's like, I mean, I guess it's easy for me to say looking at it because it's like widely accepted that this is the best one. So it's like easy to be like,
maybe
that's a silly
Attack
opinion.
of the Clones.
Well, but looking at it and understanding what we understand about movies and about Star Wars specifically, like it taking a more serious, darker tone is part of what makes this movie so good. Mm-hmm. Because it still has that like whimsical adventure in it. It's not just that.
Yeah.
There's more stakes in this one. I guess the stakes of the first one is blowing up planets, which are pretty high stakes. But the stakes feel more like immediate.
They're also like more emotional character
Yeah.
things than like the world will end and they're going to control the entire universe.
Yeah, the stakes aren't bigger, but they are like more important. Like the stakes aren't, oh no, a planet's going to blow up. It's like the people we care about specifically might get captured and die, which is a bit more, I don't know, you get more attached to the characters.
Yeah.
So in the production of this film, as we discussed in the A New Hope episode, George Lucas didn't think Star Wars would do well. So he'd like written some sort of treatment for Empire Strikes Back. But then he was like, oh shoot, I guess I got to do this. But he didn't really want to write the whole thing. He also didn't really want to direct it. So he kind of like looked outward to look for writers, and he got a writer, Lee Brackett, to kind of like, she was a science fiction writer, and she kind of like wrote a first draft of the story, kind of worked with George Lucas to kind of write that. But when he hired her to do that, she had already been diagnosed with cancer, and he knew that, but he hired her anyway. But unfortunately, after writing the first draft, she then passed. And then George Lucas was like, well, the studio gave me very limited production time. So he's like, I guess I've just got to write the second draft. So he did that, and later hired on Lawrence Kasdan, who had written Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah,
Which
just
is
a little guy.
Which is big. He's just a little writer, just a little independent writer. So he got him to come on and write new drafts of it as well. And as far as director goes, George Lucas also didn't want to direct it, so he looked elsewhere to look for directors as well. Eventually hiring Irvin Kershner, who was a friend of his, and he was very hesitant to come on as director because he was like, this is the biggest movie of all time. And you're asking me to come in and take your thing and make it better. And a lot of apparently his friends and colleagues were like, you should not do this, because if it's not amazing, you're going to be blamed for it not being amazing. Which is interesting because then it was not received as amazing. So I wonder if that kind of came true at the time. Luckily, since it's been made clear that he kind of is largely responsible for the movie being as good as it is. He did go over budget and over production time a lot, but that wasn't really his fault. There was one of the producers, Gary Kurtz, which George Lucas tried to replace before production because he thought he did a bad job in A New Hope being a producer, but then he just kept him on, and then production kind of got out of hand over budget. There were a lot of problems. So then eventually George Lucas replaced him anyway. But Gary Kurtz blames the production issues on inflation and on some other things that happened. When they were shooting the Hoth stuff, there was a lot of weather related problems. In a lot of the in studio stuff, they were shooting in some of the same spaces as The Shining was shooting at the time, and there was a fire, and it kind of fucked them up, and they had to change.
Because I think Dagobah was in a studio.
Yeah,
yeah,
and so there were a lot of problems. So I don't know if obviously I wasn't there, but
are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
But so those are Gary Kurtz's explanations. George Lucas thinks it was just Gary Kurtz's fault for being bad.
Nice.
And giving, because Irvin Kershner apparently would just be I think we should do this, and I think it would really serve the movie well. And Gary Kurtz would be like, all right. And it would be okay, but we don't really have the money for that. So George Lucas basically just paid.
Made up the budget that they needed?
When I was doing some research, almost any time that there was and then this thing went over budget, or they needed this thing or whatever, it's almost always, so George Lucas just paid it.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Which he debated funding the entire movie himself, which he did later with the prequels.
Yeah.
But he just hated studio interference. But he ended up making a deal with 20th Century Fox at the time to basically be don't fuck with me, basically.
Yeah. It is kind of crazy that these were Fox movies.
Yeah.
And they weren't even it wasn't even when Disney and Fox merged that they got them. They just literally just bought Star Wars for $4 billion or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. That is weird. Disney buys Star Wars from Fox, or I guess from George Lucas, but then kind of from Fox. Because would George Lucas have
I think it's only from Lucasfilm. Because I think George Lucas probably kept control of the Star Wars IP.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there would have been a lot more.
Yeah.
But Fox, I assume, helped produce them and also gets a cut of the box office.
Yeah, it was kind of a thing. I think they had something set up where it's the more the movie made, the more percentage of the profits Fox would get, which is a good deal for them because they basically just they just made the movie without them having to do anything, and then just made a bunch of money. So as far as how much this movie made, the budget was bigger than last time, but still like relatively small considering.
But it was supposed to be around the same as the last one though. It just got inflated because of like the costs that mounted.
Yeah. So kind of we'll come back to this through tying this other thing together. Irvin Kershner, the director, didn't want to do the movie. He eventually was convinced to do it by George Lucas, basically because George Lucas was like, you can do whatever, you can do what you want. Like, obviously follow the script. Yeah. But like, I'm not going to get involved. And that was kind of like one of Kershner's main concerns, was that George Lucas would be like breathing over his neck on set every day. Yeah. Which like I think apparently George Lucas was aware of. He was like, if I'm on set, I'm gonna have a hard time not being like, this is my thing. This is my thing. So he just was not on set 90% of the time. Nice. But there was a time that he came on set because the Bank of America was concerned about like, I'm sure this is more just like early Hollywood stuff, but like the Bank of America came in because they were concerned about how much it was costing. Oh, yeah. I think because George Lucas partially funded the movie by taking out a big bank loan. So they were worried. And George Lucas apparently came onto set and told like Kershner and like Gary Kurtz and all of the like producers and everyone like, just lie about the budget. Like he basically said to tell them that the budget was going to be 17 million. Yeah. But it ended up being just over 30 million. Yeah. Which like the movie made 550 million basically. So
yeah, I think it's a pretty like good bet. Yeah. Like even if this movie is worse, it'll make that budget back. Yeah. Because the first one was so big, right?
Yeah. It must have been so stressful for like studio executives, for like producers, for George Lucas, for the director, like for everyone to be like, literally we've like the most successful movie ever has been created, and somehow we have to do something else with it. Yeah. Like the room for error is massive, and the fact that they then make the best one is kind of insane actually. Yeah.
So what do you think of the movie?
I think it's really good. Yeah. Kind of a thing that people assume about me is that I've seen all of the movies a million times. I've seen them a lot.
So you're a liar.
But like there was a period of probably like 10 years where I'd only seen the original trilogy movies like a time or two. Like probably before.
What would your estimate be now?
Like of how many times I've watched each of them? That's tough. Because like I would like kind of put a lot of them on repeat when I was a kid. Yeah. So like I don't really know. But then again, like I also mostly, we had like the prequels first. And then we got the like original trilogy. So like the one I've seen the most is probably Revenge of the Sith. Okay. Because that's the only one we had on DVD. So I could just put it in and watch it instead of having to rewind it on VHS. Nice. I don't know. I truly have no estimate for how many times I've watched movies. The only one I know for sure is that one turned off. Oh, it didn't plug it in. Is it dead? Yeah. Oh, well. That's okay. They don't need to see my face. Although this does mean I have a bit of security. I can take a big old bite out of this breakfast sandwich, maybe.
That's disgusting how you were talking.
The only one I know for sure how many times I've watched it is Rise of Skywalker. That's like 5. I watched it in theater once. And then I watched it in theater again because I was like, it can't be as bad as it was the first time. And then it was. And then I watched it to research for Star Wars trivia. And then I think I watched it so probably 4 times.
Well, you watched it for your Star Wars Harry Potter.
Oh yeah, so yeah, probably 4 times.
Too many.
bad.
4 too many.
Not a good film. I mean, we'll see what I think about that film. Anyway, but like, my thing is like, I always knew that Empire was like by far the one that is considered the best one.
Yeah.
But I never really thought so because I was like, I love lightsabers when I was a kid. But as I've gotten older, it's like become abundantly clear. When we talk about Return of the Jedi, I'll talk a bit more about it. But like, Empire and Jedi have kind of like flip-flopped multiple times for me over which I like better.
Yeah.
But I am able to say objectively that like Empire Strikes Back is like close to being a perfect film in my
I think so too. I think it's like it's a very incredible achievement, especially like coming out of that one, that they took the characters that we knew and loved and then were able to like add real depth to them in this movie, where it's like they didn't have a ton of depth in A New Hope. They were like characters and you understood them and like what they were going through. But now there's more like, I think Irving Kershner is a little better at like the thing where the characters are just hanging out than George Lucas is. Yeah. Because he's like able to slow it down, whereas I don't feel like George Lucas slows things down very well.
Yeah. Well, he's like notorious for being not a great actor's director, like in general. Like apparently on A New Hope, there was a point where like the actors and other production members would like make fun of him a little bit because the only notes he ever had in scenes was to say faster or more intense. And there was even a point where he lost his voice during production and like the crew just gave him 2 signs to hold up that said faster and more intense on them that he'd just hold up at the end of like, so he's not great at like going to an actor and being like, so this is kind of what you're trying to get out of it, blah, blah, blah. I think Kershner has to kind of get most of the credit for like getting these performances out of these actors. Like Mark Hamill is
so much better in
leagues better than he was in the first one. Yeah. And like,
and I think the character of Luke is even better too, though.
Oh yeah, because the first movie he's just like, oh man, I want to go on an adventure, and that's kind of most of it. Whereas in this one, it's like he has fears, he has aspirations, he's like a little bit like overconfident in some areas. He thinks he knows everything, but really he kind of knows nothing. Yeah, all of the characters like are given many more layers in this movie. Yeah. And man, Han Solo, really this is a Han Solo movie.
Yeah, this is where it's like you kind of, in A New Hope I was talking about how I feel like Han Solo is not like fully realized except for a couple parts. Yeah. This is where you're kind of like, oh, this is exactly who Han Solo is. Yeah. Like, I feel like in this movie, more than A New Hope, this is like what Star Wars is thought of as being. Even though like A New Hope is the first one.
Well, this is peak Star Wars. Yeah. They peaked early, but like
I think it's just like when people are like, I want Star Wars like it used, or like old Star Wars. This is more what they're thinking of than A New Hope, because they want like, now they want it to be serious. They want it to have stakes like this and stuff like that. Whereas the newer movies aren't really like that very much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a weird thing. I feel like the prequels are lacking like the personality and the heart of the original trilogy, but it still has like the world and the lore and like interesting characters. Whereas like, and like it's visually kind of ugly sometimes. Yeah. Just because of when it was made, basically.
What they were doing with.
Yeah, but I mean, like the prequels were made in like the weird era where like special effects were becoming more prevalent, but they weren't good yet. Yeah. So it's like, man, if the prequels were made either like 10 years before or 10 years after.
I mean, they could have also not made them look that ugly.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
it did just go way too far with it.
Yeah. And I think what that really is George Lucas being like an innovator, and he hit on a lot of innovations and then kind of missed on that.
Yeah.
Like he pioneered like a lot of incredible visual effects stuff that is still like used today. It was the first foray into that, and it didn't really land anyway.
And it doesn't even look good now, which he wouldn't have known, but it's like, it's basically he was making the prequels like they were Marvel movies, how they make Marvel movies now.
Yeah.
And the Marvel movies aren't like the best looking movies.
No.
So it's just, he was trying to innovate something that is not the best thing. Like, it would have just been better if they built some sets and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like they did build some sets, but like a lot of we'll talk about it when we talk about the prequels more, but like a lot of those actors have been pretty public about being like, yeah, it was almost impossible to act because
nothing existed.
Like, now actors are kind of used to acting on a blue screen or a green screen a little more. So you still usually complain about it. Like some of the Madam Web actors are like, it was very difficult because it's all blue screen.
I mean, you're making Madam Web. What do you expect?
But like, those movies were like some of the first to like do that. So I think the actors were like fully out of their element there. Yeah. Some of them did their best with it.
I think it's like, but I don't know. It's fine.
We'll
but
talk about those movies.
In opposition, this movie looks incredible.
Yes,
because of like all
shot.
The things that are really there and really done. Aside from like adding a couple like little droids flying around and like some establishing shots that are from like special editions.
There's a lot less of that in this movie than there is in the other two, though.
There's a couple times where they're like walking down a alley and then like a little droid flies around and you're like, why the fuck is that there?
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, it's looks like crap, so it's not supposed to.
What I'm actually kind of amazed by is that they're, especially looking at the Mos Eisley scene from A New Hope, and then looking at like some of the Jabba scenes from Return of the Jedi, I'm amazed that the Dagobah scenes aren't just filled with CGI schlock. Like, there's no CGI creatures in any of the Dagobah scenes.
Yeah,
And I would like to think that that's just because George Lucas had the awareness to be like, these scenes look incredible. And like, there's so many like real creatures in those scenes. Like, there's like snakes and bugs and like other random shit everywhere. And it looks so good. Dagobah's like a planet where, like, I saw one of those Instagram videos that's like, it was like, which Star Wars planet would you want to live on? And then it shows a bunch of AI generated photos that look horrible on it.
They're so cool though.
But like, I hate it. Anyway, but like,
did you know AI can make Wes Anderson?
Nope. Then Dagobah shows up, and like, a part of me wants to say I'd live on Dagobah just because it's so cool. Would not want to live there.
An absolute nightmare.
But like, it is one of my favorite planets, though. Like, the idea that the entire planet is just like overgrowth and like just fully taken over by flora and fauna, and like, it's just a very cool planet.
I think this movie has maybe the best planets of the original three. Because you've got Hoth, which I think is just incredible, and the base there is so cool. And just like the Hoth scene is just kind of perfect. And then you've got Dagobah, you've got the asteroid.
Oh yeah, you've got the asteroid,
which I guess isn't a planet, but also Bespin. Is that where Cloud City is? Yeah. Which, like, all three of those locations are cool and something you haven't seen before, because like you've kind of seen a desert thing before, right? Like that's what I love about the original trilogy, is that they go back to Tatooine for a bit in Return of the Jedi, but for the most part, it's always new planets, always new places. Yeah. Which is kind of then what I kind of hate about
the sequels more, but also a little bit the prequels don't do it as
They're not
bad.
as bad, yeah.
But like the sequels, it feels like when they introduce a new planet, it's to introduce a new planet because you don't actually fucking do anything there.
Yeah,
But
you
then,
go to like one little place there to do one little thing.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know. It like bugs me more. Here's what it is. Like, I like that the original trilogy goes back to a planet once in a while, but for the most part goes to new places.
Mm-hmm.
But when it does go back to like a new or a similar type of planet, it's just that type of planet we've been to before. Whereas like in the sequels, there's Jakku, which is just a sand planet. It's literally basically Tatooine. And then in Rise of Skywalker, they go to Pasana, which is another sand planet that's basically like Jakku. It's basically like Tatooine.
Yeah, but
it's like, just do one of the same ones you've done. It's the same planet. Like,
yeah, it's kind of stupid how like that's the thing about Star Wars is like there's so much potential to do anything, and the later like the more recent stuff just does like one little thing for the most part.
Well, like it's something that's talked about with Star Wars a lot is like the small galaxy syndrome, where it's like you're in a galaxy, and you're constantly being like, okay, here's a new thing, but actually it's not a new thing.
Yeah.
Like, so
or like
everything
they'll
feels...
just keep doing shit on Tatooine.
Yeah.
We're just like, fuck off.
Which is what annoys me is like, it made sense to go to Tatooine twice in the original trilogy because of like the context of the story.
Yeah.
Even in the prequels.
And Luke is actually from there.
Yeah. And even in the prequels, it makes sense to go back there like once or twice because of the context of the story and because Anakin is from there.
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense. But like, Tatooine's the most boring planet.
Yeah.
Like,
and
hot
I
take.
feel like they even say that too. They're like, it's just a desert planet. Like, it's nothing special.
Whenever people talk about it, they're like, yeah, there's nothing here. It's bad. Like in Return of the Jedi, when Han's like, I think my eyesight's starting to come back. Luke's like, there's nothing to see. It's all saved. It's like, why is that the one we're going back to?
Yeah.
And why is that the one we're like,
is it just
most
cheap to
going
shoot in the
to as
desert?
inspiration for new planets?
Just inexpensive to shoot in the desert, I guess.
I guess so.
Anyway. But we start on Hoth.
Yes.
With like this incredible assault by the Imperial forces on to a rebel base.
Yeah.
Which is probably, one of the better levels in Lego Star Wars.
Sure.
And also one of the better like battles in all of Star Wars.
Yeah, it's like, it's iconic because it's like a very it's a very different type of action sequence. It's like we're in ships, but we're attacking things that are on the ground, but we can't really do anything to them. And like, but we have to figure out how to stop them quick because they're about to kill everyone, basically.
Yeah. And it's immediately something you never saw in A New Hope.
Yeah.
So it's like immediately something new where it's like, oh, they're doing ground warfare basically with the Empire.
Well, yeah, because we don't really see the rebellion fight in A New Hope aside from the trench run, but that's like 12 guys in spaceships.
Yeah.
Whereas like this is like we're seeing rebels on the ground, literally in trenches with like guns, like prepared to fight these big, impossible to kill walkers.
And then also strategizing in the base as to like what they're gonna do and how they're gonna attack.
Dude, I love that kind of thing. Like 3 characters gathered around some sort of hollow screen where you're like, I don't know what they're looking at, but they're like, yeah, we can see that the walkers are now incoming. They're going past the outer perimeter. And it's like, I trust you. Like I think
you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's the whole Hoth sequence, especially since you're jumping between the action of what's going on outside and then also being pulled back into like the more personal, like Han and Leia trying to like Han has to convince Leia to leave because she's like trying to make sure that everyone's getting out okay and all that. What?
No free publicity.
That's fair. Calder just turned his can. I am a little bit concerned about people seeing like my mouth marks on the top.
I think they're gonna like steal your lip print.
Dude, imagine if you had to give lip prints instead of... Ew.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just love that, like... we'll talk about it more in Return of the Jedi, but Star Wars in general is, like, pretty great at, like, jumping between multiple sequences that are in different locations or with different characters, but you not feeling, like, disappointed that we're leaving the other one to go to the other one, because, like, it feels like it's all happening at once, and you feel like it's all tied together, and you are kind of excited about all of it, which, like, a lot of movies can't do. A lot of the time, like, you leave one character and you're like, oh shit, now we gotta sit through, like, some of this less interesting stuff for a little bit. But
what's the big Yeti called?
Wampa.
Do you think it's foreshadowing that Luke cuts off his right arm and Luke later loses his right hand?
Maybe.
Take that, Star Wars nerds.
In the original release, there weren't many shots of the Wampa. It was a lot more, like, brief close-ups and, like, stuff like that. And then the special edition added, like, full body shots and, like, a more clear shot of him cutting off the arm. So, like, that's a good special edition change.
Yeah, I feel like it's just different shots instead of putting a little CGI boy in there.
Yeah. Well, that's, like, the trouble with the special editions is it's like, I understand... Like that, if those were the only types of changes that were made, I'd be like, yes, George Lucas, I believe you when you say you're just making these changes because you're fulfilling your original vision that you couldn't before. That makes sense. But instead it's like adding little burping CGI frog boys, and it's like, whatever. Anyway.
I think another strength of this movie is that since we already know the characters, it doesn't feel the need to, like, bring us back into who they are. It's just like, and we're going. As soon as like the movie starts, it's going, and, like, there's just no slow part from the beginning. Yeah.
Like, the movie immediately starts with Luke. I mean, it starts with, like, the probe droids being sent out. But the first line is Luke being like talking to Han over the radio. So immediately we're getting interaction between two characters we know. They're not going, Luke, it's good to hear your voice again. Like, they're not reintroducing us, like you said. They're immediately just like, oh, these guys that we haven't seen in a little while, now they're doing this. And then also immediately Luke is attacked by an abominable snowman.
Yeah, you know, rip.
Which, like, most of that was because Mark Hamill got in a car crash.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I don't know if you noticed, but, like, his face looks a little different than it did in A New Hope. That's because he got in a car crash and, like, had to kind of get, like, some surgery on his face and, like, some stitches on his face, and, like, his face structure genuinely just, like, changed a bit. But it was close enough to filming that, like, he kind of had, like, a little bit of scarring on his face still. So to address that, they just made him get attacked by the Wampa, which kind of just, like, makes you not really think about it. Like, I never realized really that his face looked different, but I guess, like, in my head I was like, oh, he's got scarring on his face. Oh, and now he's fine.
He does look more like, he just looks older.
Yeah.
So I guess that probably contributed to the fact of, like, he does look more mature even as just a character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, oh man, I just love this. I don't know. I was just gonna be like, yeah, and, like, Han's good too. And it's like, obviously that I'm not adding anything by saying that. I just, like, let's talk a little bit about Darth Vader in this, actually.
Okay.
Because we talked about it, how in A New Hope he, like, yells a little bit more. He's kind of just, like, the side guy who has weird powers and is, like, evil. But in this one, he really comes into his own as, like, the bad guy. And, like, he's constantly like killing Imperial officers when they make one mistake. And it's like, it kind of establishes the hierarchy of power in the Empire, which is just like, everyone in the Empire is just trying to get promoted to more power. Everybody just wants more power.
Yeah.
And, like, you better not make a mistake, because then you'll not only lose the power, but you'll lose your life.
Damn.
But the fact that, like, because we also see, so Admiral Ozzel, I believe, is the one with the mustache that dies early on. He's basically like talking to Captain Piet, and Piet's like, yeah, one of our probe droids found something, and Ozzel's like, it's nothing. And Vader's like, can I see it? And then they show literally the rebel shield generator, and Vader's like, that's it. And Ozzel's like, I don't know, Vader. And he's like, no, it's obviously it. And then later, I think it's General Veers, who's the guy who like leads the AT-AT walker fight. He goes into Vader's little egg room and is basically like, yeah, Admiral, we've like entered the system, but they've been alerted to our presence because Admiral Ozzel thought that it would be wise to catch them by surprise. And Vader's like, he's as ignorant as he is stupid or something. Or anyway, he basically is like, he's an absolute idiot. He's like compromised this, but like we'll be fine. And then the immediate next thing he does is calls Ozzel on like the little view screen and chokes him out from afar. Yeah. And it's like, he can do that from there? Like, it just like immediately, it's like he's more threatening because he has no patience, and he's like more dangerous because he like immediately you see his power increased, because it's like, oh, he can just choke someone with his mind from like the other side of the ship. What else can he do?
Yeah.
And obviously he's a man with a mission in this movie. Like,
yeah,
he's like, yeah, we'll go through an asteroid field. I don't care if there's asteroids. We got to get these guys.
He doesn't have any like he knows what he's trying to get to.
Yeah.
Right. Like, whereas before he had to answer to someone and he was doing what they needed. Now he's just like, I'm gonna kill Luke Skywalker. Kind of, I guess.
Yeah.
Or like, I'm going for Luke Skywalker and I'm going to kill all these rebels.
Yeah.
Whereas before, like, that it's kind of quelled.
Yeah.
There is like part of me that because the Hoth stuff is so good, I'm like, oh, fuck, I kind of wish this was the whole thing. Because it'd just be kind of cool to have just like a movie that was just a war.
Just one set piece. Yeah.
But obviously that's not what happened. And Luke goes to Dagobah after being told by Obi-Wan while being captured in the cave, I think, right?
Well, he's captured in the cave. We see the first ever, like, force pull or push or whatever when he grabs his lightsaber out of the snow, which was just done by Mark Hamill throwing it, and then they reversed it, which is, of course, it is. I've done that, like, hundreds of times making little Star Wars short films at school or whatever. It's like, that's the easiest way to do it, and I like that they actually did. But then he leaves the cave, and then is just like walking in like a horrible blizzard and falls over because obviously he's gonna pass out and die. And then he sees the ghost of Ben, and Ben's just like, Luke, go to the Dagobah system. Talk with Yoda, the Jedi who trained me, which is one of those script things that we kind of talked about last time that is like, technically Yoda trained Obi-Wan because Yoda trained all the younglings in the Jedi Temple, but like,
it was Qui-Gon.
Yeah, but it was Qui-Gon. But at the time, it was probably just understood that, like, oh, Yoda trained Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
But like, whatever. That's just like one of those technicality things that like now adding more content makes it different, but it's not.
Doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter.
He can't tell him to go meet Qui-Gon, so like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because Qui-Gon didn't exist. But then.
So true.
So Ben's like, go to the Dagobah system, and Luke's like, Ben. Han comes up on his tauntaun, sees Luke, wields a lightsaber, which is pretty cool. Pulls out his Luke's lightsaber, cuts open the tauntaun. I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
That's good.
Thanks. That's my anyway.
The two boys, do they both get in there?
I'd assume so. We only really see him like start to put Luke in there. I'm assuming like Han huddles up next to it. But like, and then the guys come out and say, or the guys come out and say they saved them, is what I was gonna say, but that makes no sense.
All right.
The other rebels come out, then the snow speeders, and they find them, and it's all great and grand. Luke gets in a bacta tank to get healed up in his little diaper. And then we have a little brother-sister kiss.
That's hot.
Which I kind of want, which, like, I love that scene, because, like, so much of this movie is Han being like, I don't know, Leia, I think you like me, and Leia being like, no. But then, like Leia only really, it's weird, in the first movie, Han only pretended to have interest in Leia to make Luke jealous, and then in this movie, like, Leia kisses Luke to make Han jealous.
Yeah.
And it's just like a weird, like,
Weird
switch around
triangle
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as far as, like, the relationship of Luke and Leia, because also later, after Luke leaves Dagobah, and Obi-Wan's like, that boy is our last hope, and Yoda says, no, there is another. There's some debate as to who Yoda's talking about there. Some people think he's talking about Anakin, but that doesn't really make sense because he's constantly like, you got to kill him. Even in Return of the Jedi, he's like, you got to kill that guy. So it's like, does he really believe that Anakin's the other hope? So, like, the generally accepted thing is that he's talking about Leia. But, like, if Leia is Luke's sister in this movie, then, like, why? Like, I'm just talking from a writing perspective. If Yoda's talking about Leia and Leia is Luke's sister in this movie, why make them do a big kiss, you know? And then even at the end, after they save Luke when he's hanging off the thing on Cloud City, she kisses him on the mouth again. And it's just like, why you doing that, George? Kind of deal.
He's kind of a freak, though.
But so I did a little bit of research on this because I wasn't even sure when it was decided that Leia was Luke's sister. From what I understand, in A New Hope, there was no relation.
Yeah.
Planned. In this movie, it was planned that Luke would have a sister, because the original writer for the film, who I mentioned before, Lee Brackett,
Yeah.
she wrote in her, like, draft of the film that Luke would have a sister, but it wasn't decided that it was Leia. They were just gonna be like, Luke's got a sister somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe she'll, like, come and help if they find her or whatever. So, and then in Return of the Jedi, it seems like it was decided, let's just make Leia Luke's sister. So that's why Yoda says there's another, because he's referencing Luke's sister. But at the time, it was not Leia. But then people go, well, then how did Luke reach out with the Force and connect to Leia at the end when he's like saying her name and she's like, Luke is out there, we gotta go get him. And it's like, that can be explained as like he just reached out to her with the Force, not necessarily there was like a brother-sister connection there.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think it's interesting. I think it is just like a bit of one of those weird things.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, it's only kisses, and they're clearly not in like a way of like she loves him so much. It's more of her being like, well, Han, fuck you, Han.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
it
the
is
thing.
just a strange thing, though.
There was a point when Olivia and I were watching it where like something happened or something was said, and Olivia was like, "You're just you just made out with your brother like an hour ago," and I was like, "They never made out. Like,
Yeah.
There's never any like romantic, sexual, like whatever. There's like Leia kisses Luke to prove a point, really." Anyway, I just wanted to address the incest allegations because real world answer, they didn't really know what the plan was for those characters. In universe answer, it's not even that bad. Like they
they don't know they're related. It's not like they're like, and I'm gonna kiss my brother to get back at you.
Exactly.
It's just like,
and like, I don't know, because like a lot of people's problem with that kind of thing is like, yeah, they didn't know in the universe, but like, why, if you knew they were siblings, why do that? And it's like, well, they didn't know, so
Yeah.
It's kind of easily explained away as soon as you think
I
about
think
it for
the
like
thing
4
that
seconds.
needs to be answered for more is why Yoda kind of comes off as a sex pest.
A sex pest?
Yeah.
What does he do that's sex pesting?
Just the way his demeanor kind of.
I think he's more of just like a little vermin.
Yeah.
Like when he's like on all fours and you see his little butt sticking out and he's like digging through Luke's shit. It's like, man, this is a wacky old like little puppet boy.
Which I kind of wish that was Yoda's thing, but I guess it is just like he's so much older. Like he's not even that much older though from
What,
the
then the
prequels
prequels?
to
I think it's
these.
more like it can be explained as two things. One, that he's just been cooped up on Dagobah all alone for like a couple decades.
Mm-hmm.
So like he's probably lost it a little bit, but also like he's kind of wacky crazy until he reveals to Luke that he's Yoda, and then he's
Yeah.
not really crazy. He's a lot more like measured and like
But-
quiet.
In like what's the timeline difference between the two? Like 30 years?
Yoda goes to Dagobah like right after Luke and Leia are born.
Yeah.
In this movie, Luke and Leia are supposed to be 19.
So it's 20 years.
Yeah.
He's a 900, which is like a fraction of his life.
Yeah.
So in that time, he goes from like surly and like quiet kind of
Yeah.
to a little vermin.
Yeah.
Like, and not that he is that the whole time, but like that just seems like a radical change.
I think most of it is like, I think it's supposed to be he was kind of putting on an act
Okay.
because he didn't know who Luke was. Well, no, because I think he did know who Luke was. I think he was kind of just testing him a
Yeah.
little bit to be like, are you just gonna shoot me if I'm like a crazy guy, or like how are you gonna treat me? Because like, yeah. Anyway,
Another thing that I think this movie is better with is just the music in general.
this is something I realized at the end of the last. We did not talk about music at all in the A New Hope episode.
Yeah, I think that's fine. That one was a little long, so we'll do music in this one.
That's why I didn't add it at the end.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, the music in that movie obviously incredible. The most known track of Star Wars is probably the Imperial March, which was
Yeah.
not introduced until this film. Just because it's like, it's so obvious what the Imperial March is for.
Yeah.
It's like immediately striking, I guess. And like Han and Leia's theme, like,
Yeah.
and then like Yoda's theme when he's lifting the X-wing, like a lot of the Cloud City music, like,
yeah. Like I was which is kind of I think why this feels like the realization of Star Wars, because it has the music that is still coming back 30 or 40 years later.
Yeah.
In like the newer ones. But it's crazy how like the use of music also changes in this one, where it's like they will throw in a little bit of a what the Han and Leia theme, like when they kind of connect, but then when they disappear, it'll go back, so it'll like fade away. It'll be
Yeah.
like a little bit and then fade back away.
Well, that's like part of what I love is like, obviously you can be like, this is the Yoda theme, this is the Han and Leia theme, this is the like Attack on Hoth sequence theme, like, but they kind of all blend together and borrow from each other
Yeah.
for different like beats, and that kind of creates the essence of Star Wars. Is like you hear like 3 notes of a thing and you're like, oh, I could probably point to 5 scenes throughout Star Wars that use that motif like immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah. The music is like genuinely incredible. We should probably say John Williams
Nominated this year for an Oscar.
for Dial
Indiana
of Destiny.
Jones.
Very interesting.
Nominated for the thing he did in the 80s, basically.
Basically.
He's like 95 years old.
It's like how I think he might have, I don't know for sure, but I think he might have also been nominated for the Oscar for Rise of Skywalker.
I think he gets nominated every time.
But like the thing with Rise of Skywalker is like that movie's score is literally John Williams was told to like basically only take old stuff and reuse it and rework it. And like basically make like a medley of like old stuff. So it's like not really a new soundtrack.
Yeah.
But anyway.
He gets nominated every time.
Yeah.
I watched Dial of Destiny. It's an unremarkable movie, but like the Indiana Jones theme is kind of undeniable.
Yeah.
And I think he's the most nominated and also oldest Oscar nominee.
And he's not won that much.
No. Well, because also a lot of it's just like, okay, let's put John Williams in there.
Yeah.
Because it is one of those categories, I think, at the Oscars where it's like, you're kind of going off of how you felt about the movie, but also kind of like voting for a name because maybe you don't fully remember all of the scores, which I think is a kind of a fair thing because I think the best thing a score can do is just add and like blend in with everything that's going on.
So he actually won the Oscar for A New Hope, and then was nominated for Empire Strikes Back. And
How many has he won though?
like Oscars total?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5.
Huh.
He's won 5. He's been nominated for, I'm not going to count. There's too many.
I think it's like 53. 54 Academy Awards.
If you look at like the years, he's been nominated like
Pretty much every year.
other year, basically, if
Yeah.
not every year.
Yeah, because like you look at this, he does all the Spielberg scores. So he's done Jaws, Close Encounters, E.T., all of the Indiana Jones stuff.
Home Alone.
Then he also did Superman. He was nominated for Best Original Song.
Harry Potter.
Yeah, Schindler's List. And then it just keeps going where it's just like, if a Spielberg movie is probably going to get nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah.
So like if John Williams is working on every Spielberg movie, like he's probably going to get nominated for Oscars because they're just Oscars movies.
Yeah.
Like War Horse, Lincoln, The Fablemans too. But yeah, kind of a weird one that he's getting nominated for Indiana Jones 5, but I don't know.
Whatever.
Might as well just keep giving them to him as long as he's working.
Yeah.
What do you think about the whole asteroid sequence?
I think it's like great because like it immediately it's like, oh shit, we're going into an asteroid field, and Han's like, yep, we're going in it, and all of the characters are like, are you insane? And he's like, yeah.
And then you get the iconic line, "Don't tell me the odds."
Never tell me the odds.
Never. Aren't you telling me the odds?
Are you should not be the one that is telling me the percentage chance.
Hey, little gold guy, get out of here.
Yeah.
I would have been a great Han Solo.
I used to know all of the different like odds that 3PO gives at each of the different times in the movies. It's slipping my brain.
Then you started having sex.
No. That still hasn't happened yet, so hopefully one day.
Then you kissed a girl.
No. Well, we'll see.
You still haven't. I think it's fun, but here's the other thing. It's like there is a part of me that is kind of annoyed by how much this movie, like, it gets referenced and ripped off, even kind of within Star Wars.
Yeah.
Where, like, the asteroid sequence does remind you of, or at least reminds me of the part in, like, Phantom Menace when they're going into Jar Jar's little place where they're getting chased by the big fish and it's like, always a bigger fish or something.
Sure.
Or maybe they're leaving. I don't really remember. Haven't watched that one yet.
We'll get there.
And there's also just like the cultural references where it's like in Civil War where Tom Holland's Spider-Man is like, oh, you know that really old movie Empire Strikes Back, and like all the parodies and shit where when I'm watching it, those like flash to my mind. I'm like,
yeah.
It's kind of one of those things where it's like, I fuck off. Like
it is kind of like, it's a thing of like Star Wars has had such a cultural impact and has like such staying power in pop culture that like it is because it is so good, but like it then also is like a bit of a problem where like, yeah, when I'm watching like there's points where something in the movie reminds me of the Lego game, reminds me of the Family Guy parody, reminds me of the other movies, reminds me of references I've heard, reminds me of like...
Yeah, it's like you're constantly fighting the memories of Star Wars.
Yeah. And it's like, man, I kind of just want to watch this. Like, I made such a point of watching like the original trilogy as they are without considering any of the other things. But then it's like, it's really hard when like I'm watching like the incredible chemistry between Han and Leia and like the sexual tension kind of there. And like, not kind of, but like...
They're so horny. Everyone gets horny in war though.
That's true. But like, it's impossible for me to like watch those scenes and not... Like the first thought is always like, man, this is so good. And then the second thought is usually something else like, and then they get separated in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, and then Han dies. So, and it's like, great. Glad I'm thinking about that instead of being focused on like how incredible the chemistry and the moment of these two characters are.
Yeah.
And it's like the most prevalent one is in Return of the Jedi, which we'll get to just because like the Emperor existing and like what is to come of that character.
Yeah, it's like, it's why it was so much harder to watch these with a fresh mind than it, for me, it was for Fast and Furious. Because like, it just doesn't have the same cultural footprint at all. Yeah. So like, you're watching Too Fast, Too Furious. No one really makes jokes about that movie unless it's like deep Fast and Furious communities. But like, everyone can kind of make a joke or like say something about Star Wars.
The like extent that Fast and Furious movies are joked about as being like the family. Yeah. Like that's like the extent, whereas like Star Wars, every single line from every single scene in these movies has been joked about or memed or like parodied.
It's like every slightly nerdy stand-up comedian has to have their like Star Wars bit.
Yeah. Like, I think the thing with the original trilogy is, like, what we've said. They've been referenced and parodied and, like, are such, like, prevalent things in pop culture. It's kind of inescapable. I think what we'll find in, like, the prequels is that, like, those have been memed to shit. So, like, every time a meme line comes up, it's hard not to be like, there's the meme line. Yeah. But, like...
Hello there.
That's just kind of, like, the issue with watching Star Wars with quote-unquote fresh eyes.
Yeah. But the asteroid thing is really cool.
Yeah.
And I think it's like sick that they've landed in the boy.
They've landed in the Exogorth.
Okay. This is wild.
But like I love how they figure it out too. They're kind of like, I guess we're in this cave. They're all like chilling, being like, I hope one of the bombs that the TIE bombers are dropping doesn't fall perfectly down this hole and onto us. Yeah. And then they see like, oh, there's Minox out there. So they go and talk to Minox. But Leia's like, the fucking ground is squishy. This is a weird meteor. And then like it starts to move around. And Han's like, wait a second. And the fact that he's like, and just shoots the floor. He's just like, I have a feeling that this might be bad. Shoots the floor. And then he's like, yep, we got to leave. Actually, we have to leave right now. Because not only are we in a guy, I just shot his tongue.
That's basically such a cool idea.
Yeah. So
that
good.
Like there's just a guy living in an asteroid.
And it's like such a like they're in there and you're not thinking about it. And then the time from, wait, there's something wrong with this cave to finding out that it was a big like space slug is like maybe like 30 seconds tops. And like then it's over and they move to the next
movie
thing.
Just moves quickly.
Yeah. But it doesn't feel like, because like in some of the sequel movies it feels like they're like, here's another thing and here's another thing and here's another, and it's like none of this matters. Whereas like here it's like whoa, that was cool. Like it doesn't really matter, but that was cool. Yeah. It's like I don't know what the differences are. I think in the sequels it just feels like they're doing things to do them, whereas this is like world building.
Yeah, and it's not like,
and it's used for characters.
Yeah, all of like that scene in the Mylon?
The Exogorth.
What's a Mylar?
Minox. Those are the flying things that were like attaching themselves to ship and feeding on the power cables.
The thing with that scene is like you are getting some character development in there.
Yeah.
I feel like my voice, I'm talking like a little boy. I feel like there is some character development. Well, there is some character development in there, which makes the scene like useful. But then it's not like, look at the coolest thing. Look at this thing. Look how smart and cool we are that we came up with this thing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what like they do in the sequels, where it's like trying to show you how much lore they know more than like just a thing existing and maybe you find out about it later. Like, do they even say Exogorth or whatever? No. Yeah.
Well, like, dude, they don't even ever say Ewok, I don't think. In Return of the Jedi, like a lot of these like names and things just that people found out once the toys were released, but like it's because like a lot of this stuff it doesn't really matter.
But like you go into the sequels, and Rise isn't the best one to pull from, but it's like, oh, we're going to Blogablod for their Bluggity Blue festival, and these blues.
Yeah,
and it's just like they explain the whole thing, where it's just kind of like, or just take me there.
Yeah,
which is kind of what Star Wars needs to be.
Yeah. Well, it's like, and the like going into the Exogorth is like used as, because the whole movie, especially the Han, Leia, 3PO, Chewie stuff, is like so hectic and panicked and fast. Like they're like the whole movie they are running really, but like being in like the Exogorth is kind of like used as a, okay, they finally get like a moment of peace. That's when we get like Han like approaching Leia, like when she's like fixing something she's turning basically. But like they have like the really tense like scene where like he's like, why are you scared? And she's like, I'm not scared. And he's like, you're trembling. And it's like, what is happening right now? And then 3PO fucks it up by being like, which is
well, because they do kiss, right?
That was really high pitched what I just did.
That sounds exactly like him.
They do kiss, and it's like going well, and then 3PO's like, oh, I rerouted the power to the shield generator. And Han's like, thanks, pal.
Yeah.
Like, fuck off. And like kind of ruins it. Like literally when that happened, Olivia yelled. She was like, go away. Like literally any other time than right now. But like it's used for that. We get like a scene where like when the like the cave shakes the first time and like Leia like falls down onto Han's lap and she's like, let go of me. And he's like, she's like, I said let go of me. And he's like, don't get too excited. And she's like, your presence is barely enough to get me excited or whatever. And then he like, I forget what line he says next, but he like says a little zinger and then leaves. And then we're just like left alone with Leia in the cockpit. Like, and we get to see her react to Han and what he said without any sort of like observation of anyone else. And she's very clearly like, that fucking guy, he's getting in my head or whatever. Like he's very clear. She's very clearly like, you see, oh, there is actually something there. She's just kind of in denial about it. So then when that next scene comes where they're together, you're like, I now understand that this isn't like him putting himself onto her. It's like there is actually something there because now we know the motivations of Leia as well. And it's like, so it's not that like they did a space worm to do a space worm. It's like the space worm is kind of like an avenue for us to get some more downtime with these characters and like expand them more. And then also there's a space worm. Yeah.
And then it means more when we go to Cloud City and like they get turned on and all of this stuff. And Lando's hitting on Leia and like all of these things are happening.
I want to clarify. You mean turned on as in like Lando turns on them?
Yeah.
I thought you meant they get turned on.
Well, like I think they do get a little turned on.
They get a little turned on.
How could you not?
How could you not?
But I do mean like they get stabbed in the back. Is that good enough for you?
That's good. They get double crossed.
Crisscross applesauce.
P.
Sorry,
I just blurted that out because I'm going to tell a story. I'm not going to name him though. My childhood best friend, when I was in like the first or second grade, we would go to the bathroom together and
Anthony
use the
McDyess.
same. No, what did you say? Not that name at all. Whatever you said, but we'd go to the same urinal and we'd cross our pee streams and we'd go crisscross applesauce pee. There's the story.
You
So
have
when
some
you said
deep
crisscross applesauce, I
programming
immediately
in
said
your
pee
head.
without realizing that is not something other people know. Anyway,
What the fuck?
so let's talk briefly about Cloud City then. Amazing set piece.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. Genuinely, I think Bespin is one of my favorite Star Wars planets.
Is there more to Bespin? Like, it is a mining colony, right?
Yeah, but it's basically a gas planet. Like it's like Jupiter
Oh,
or something.
okay.
So they are mining gas.
Oh.
So like
So the like houses and stuff are connected to a little thing in the center, basically.
yeah, like I guess like you could argue it's kind of like a big like what would you call it? Like space station, but it's just kind of like floating in within the gas.
Yeah.
And everyone's living there. I mean, it must be breathable because like people are kind of walking in open air.
It might just be like once they get below that, they can't. Like it might be a kind of a heavy gas,
That's true. Yeah.
right?
But yeah, it's basically like they're mining. I think it's Tabana gas.
Okay.
Whatever that is.
Without regulations.
Without regulations. Yeah, that's how they're staying out of the arms of the threat to the Empire. Anyway.
All right.
But the introduction of Lando is so good because all like Han's talking about him like, yeah, I've known him for a long time. Him and I, we go a long way back, but he's not really saying anything about their relationship until we see him go to Chewie and be like, keep your head up. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's
Just
be
in
aware.
case.
And like Han or Lando like walking up and being like, you no good swindler, like you got a lot of guts coming here after what you pulled. And like Han being like, fuck, we might actually be screwed. But then Lando does his signature laugh and smile, gives him a big hug, and it's like, oh. And I like that you don't really know about Lando.
Yeah.
Like, he's clearly a charming, likable guy, and he's saying all the right things. Like, he's just talking about, like, being an administrator, and, like, he's bonding with Han a little bit, but you're like, there is something that is, like, I'm not fully trusting here.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of...
It feels like he's got a facade.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, but like what's going on with him under that? Like, what is his plan? Because he's a very like outgoing kind of salesman-esque.
Yeah, he's very
con
salesman.
man-esque. Yeah.
And, like, it kind of disappears as soon as he turns them over to Vader. Like,
Yeah.
the facade goes away. And, like, you still see, like, the likable Lando, but he's not, like, pretending anymore.
Yeah. He's not like trying to like make him have a good time.
Yeah, like, so he turns them over to Vader. We see them, like, torture Han with, like, this weird, like, heat
Yeah.
thing, which is, like, and you just hear him scream. Then you see him get thrown into the cell, and he's like, they didn't even ask me any questions.
Yeah.
Which, like, kind of makes you go, what the fuck are they doing? Like, they literally just tortured a guy to torture a guy.
Yeah, but that's kind of sick as fuck though.
Yeah, but it, like, kind of, like, sets these stakes that, like, the Empire very much has control of this situation, and, like, if they're willing to just torture Han for the sake of it, then, like, what else are they willing to do? And then it turns out they're willing to put him in carbonite.
Crazy.
Which we'll get to.
Literally crazy.
But, like, when Lando goes in there basically to update them on the situation, because, like, the original deal is that the Empire will, like, let Lando and Cloud City do what they've been doing, and, like, the Empire will stay out of it if Lando hands over, like, Luke.
Yeah.
to-
It's basically just Luke
Yeah.
and
then,
Han to job. Or
Oh, yeah, and well, I don't even think he fully knows about that at first.
I think he's giving Han to the bounty hunter, right?
Yes. But he thinks that he's handing him over alive.
Yeah.
But then Vader's like...
Who is Boba Fett?
Yeah, who is Boba Fett? Yeah. So, but then Vader's like, yeah, actually also Leia and Chewie have to stay here, and they're not ever allowed to leave ever in their lives.
Yeah.
And Lando's like, that was not part of the deal. And Vader's like, I have altered the deal, and you should pray that I don't alter it any further. And Lando's like, the deal's getting worse all the time.
Yeah.
And then like, and then he changes it. So then Lando goes in and he's like very honest with them, where he's like, Leia and Chewie like will be safe and like protected, but they have to stay here. Mm-hmm. And Leia doesn't even ask any questions about that. She's just like, what about Han? And it's like, he's being handed over to the bounty hunter. And it's like, and then she says, Vader wants us all dead. And Lando's like, he doesn't even want you guys at all. He's after some guy named Skywalker. And they're like, there it is. Mm-hmm. And then Vader alters the deal again, where he's like, now also Han is going in carbonite. Mm-hmm. And then he alters the deal again and is like, oh, and also Leia and Chewie are coming with me. And and that's when Lando's like, okay, this is not close to the deal we made before. Yeah. So then he like punches into his little wrist thing, gets Lobot to show up and like fucking save him, I guess. Mm-hmm. And that's and saves him. And then Chewie basically strangles him to death, which is pretty good. Good. But like, are they all good? Yeah. Has that one just not been filming at all the whole time? Turn off. Nice. We'll just do it for the next two. But yeah, I don't know. Lando is just such a great addition to this cast because like he's someone who you don't really trust, but like you kind of have to, especially after he like saves Leia and Chewie, and he's like, we could still get Han. I like that he calls him Han instead of Han the whole time. Last thing about Lando that I'll say. At the very end, when he's like, don't worry, we'll find Han, like, I promise, and he's in the Millennium Falcon with Chewie, he's wearing Han's clothes. I don't know if you noticed that.
I didn't notice that. That's weird. He's
literally wearing Han's, like, white shirt and black vest from A New Hope.
That's kind of strange.
It's a little weird, and there's not, like, the only explanation I can think of is, like, maybe that's Han's, like, captain's clothes.
I think it might also be, like, maybe they got onto the ship and then then Lando's like, can I like get cleaned up and like changed or something? Yeah. And then there's just they have Han's clothes there. Yeah. But it is strange.
I just like that it's kind of unexplained and it's just like, is he wearing Han's clothes?
Yeah, maybe he's trying to entice Leia. Maybe he thought it was the clothes.
Maybe. It's a little weird. But anyway, what else is good to talk about? Actually, since we're here, let's talk about the carbonite sequence.
Okay.
So the main reason that they did that is because when they all signed on for A New Hope, Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher signed a 3-movie deal. Mm-hmm. Harrison Ford refused to do so. Nice. So he signed movie to movie.
He's like LeBron.
Yeah. And he wanted Han to be killed off in the first one. And George Lucas was kind of like, I want this to have a happy ending. Like this, we're probably not doing another movie. So like, it's fine. And Harrison Ford was like, okay, fine. And then convinced him to do this movie, but Harrison Ford was like, I don't know if I'm gonna want to do a second one, man. So
or like a third one.
Or sorry, a third one. So they put him in Carbonite so that like if Harrison Ford decided not to do a third one, they could just be like, well, he's in Carbonite, I guess. So like, whatever. Yeah. Luckily, he comes back, and then we get a great like sequence, which we'll talk about in the Return of the Jedi episode. But what'd you think of the whole concept of the Carbonite and like how it was executed?
I think it's like a pretty cool idea that they can just like freeze people to transport prisoners. Yeah. Like, I think it's like very unique and interesting, as opposed to just having him in like some chains.
And there's something kind of brutal about like seeing him and then like 10 seconds later seeing him like as a brick basically. Yeah. And then they just like drop him onto the floor. And it's just like, so I don't know. It's very brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just like a very cool thing. Yeah. And just much cooler than other alternatives, which would be like put him in handcuffs, you know? Yeah. I think the last thing we should touch on with the movie is obviously the final fight.
Well, if that's because I feel like that is a good last thing to touch on. We didn't really talk too much about Yoda. I do
guess.
just
He is
want
a
to
bit of
talk
a
about
sex
how
pest, though.
incredible that puppet is.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
There's never a point where I'm like, and that's a puppet. Like when I'm watching the Muppets, there's sometimes where I'm like, and Kermit is very, very clearly has a man's arm up him.
Yeah.
And like he's behind some sort of like barrier so that we can't see. Like it's, but in this, there's never a point where I'm like, and that's a puppet.
Yeah, I don't even know how they really did that.
They kind of frame everything perfectly so that like you can't see really below Yoda's waist, but like it doesn't look like they're intentionally hiding it.
Yeah, it's not like he's just in front of some cardboard.
Yeah, and then you also have scenes like when he's digging through Luke's stuff where you see his full body and butt like digging, and then there's the scene where you see him walking in the distance, which I love, where he's just waddling away and he's got the little light and he's like, come, come, come. And then, so like, I just think the Yoda puppet is so good. I think Frank Oz, because Frank Oz did the puppetry and the voice, and just like an incredible job at like what a weird character to be like the most powerful Jedi that we know of to exist is this weird little green guy who's like kind of a freak.
What about Darth Sidious?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's just like got the weird speech pattern as well that makes him so unique, where it's like you can instantly kind of do an impression of him.
Yeah.
Like it's instantly iconic.
And it's like, it's not like you can't understand him. It's just a kind of a backwards way of
He's got
speaking.
bad syntax.
And something that's interesting is George Lucas loved Frank Oz's performance so much that he spent thousands of dollars trying to campaign for Frank Oz to be nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
That's kind of cool.
But
did he get it?
He did not. So
dog shit.
But here's the thing, like kind of deserved, kind of like incredible, but the Academy basically like was like a puppeteer isn't an actor, which is kind of fucked up, but like whatever. It's kind of similar to like when a lot of people were like Andy Serkis should be nominated for Best Actor for Caesar and Planet of the Apes, where it's like incredible performance, but then the Academy's like, yeah, but that's CGI. And it's like, yeah,
but there's
like,
a performance under there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently like George Lucas was like very upset that that was kind of what was determined, and apparently Frank Oz didn't really care. So
they really didn't give this movie any nominations at the Oscars.
Yeah, not really.
Aside from
it's really like the original Star Wars won so many Oscars, and then every Star Wars after that was nominated for like best score, maybe best VFX.
Yeah,
and that's
it.
Those are kind of like the standards, which is kind of a bummer. But like,
oh well, who fucking cares, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it got best sound.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Best score. It didn't even get costume design, or did it get art? Didn't get art. Oh, it got art direction, but just a nomination.
Well, oh man, the fact that we haven't mentioned Ralph McQuarrie, who's the concept artist for all the original Star Wars movies. Like, first of all, just like incredibly like beautiful and kind of mystical, perfect visuals.
Yeah.
So much of it comes from Ralph McQuarrie's concept art. And like even years and years later, like Star Wars is still using Ralph McQuarrie's concepts as like new stuff. Like there's a character in the Rebels TV show that is like basically fully based on the original concept for Chewbacca, and like there's a droid that kind of appears a few times in the background of the original trilogy that's like kind of based on one of the original concepts for Darth Vader. Like there's just like so many little things like that where like Ralph McQuarrie's concept art is kind of like the bread and butter of Star Wars visuals. Even so long after. So he's like, if we're talking about pillars of Star Wars, he's got to be like
one of the
like things that's like he kind of is responsible for the Star Wars look a little bit.
Yeah. Because everything is just so unique and so cool.
Yeah. Last thing that I'll say about the Yoda stuff. First of all, it's like last thing I'll say. First of all, but like him talking about like Luke is too old, like Luke is way too like brash and like eager, and he's impatient, and like Obi-Wan being like, I was too, and Yoda being like, shut the fuck up. Like, yeah, I know, but I love that Yoda's basically like, you're too unfocused and you will not finish the training. And Luke's like, I will. And Luke's like, no, you won't.
Yeah.
And Luke's like, I'm not afraid. And then Yoda gets kind of scary and he's like, you will be. And it's like, okay, back off. But then Yoda's like literally completely right that like Luke does gain immense fear at the end of the film, and like he leaves and like fucks up. And like,
also we should mention like the training sequence where he does go into the cave and fights Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And then it's him in there. It's just such a great like
and him being like,
seed towards what the final twist is.
And I kind of love that he doesn't talk about it. Like he doesn't go to Yoda and be like, I went in there and I saw my own face. What does that mean? And Yoda be like, oh, well, you know. It's like, no, he just sees it and is freaked out.
Yeah.
And like you kind of have to glean from it what you can. I remember as a kid truly not even realizing that was Luke's face in there. And just being like, I don't know. I guess it's like,
I guess he killed someone.
I always like thought it was like, whoa, now he knows Darth Vader's like a man and not a robot. But then like as I got older, obviously I realized what it was actually saying. But yeah, the whole training sequence is just awesome. Like the fact that they kind of strip away all music for a bit and you just hear the Dagobah sounds. Luke's like climbing a vine and swinging from it, doing backflips over logs and stuff. And like everything Yoda says about the Force is just like, it's so good that he's like especially what he's talking about when Luke is talking about like lifting the X-Wing is impossible, and him being like, it's only impossible in your mind. Like truly what is different from lifting the rock to lifting
the X-Wing.
Like it's not like you are using your muscles to lift an object. You are interacting with the energy around these things.
Yeah,
like,
which Yoda gives like the best explanation of the Force, I think. It's like simple, but also so vague that you're like, this is kind of anything. Yeah. But like it explains just enough for you to understand what Luke kind of has to do and how he has to use it. Yeah, because in A New Hope, it's kind of just like the Force is something. Yeah. Whereas like Yoda explains it as like, the Force is life. The Force creates life. The Force like it like works through life. It is all around us. It is everything. Like, and like wielding the Force is really just like deepening your connection to it. Yeah. And like that is like the perfect amount of explaining it. It's not him being like, yeah, there's shit in your blood. Yeah. Like, which like since the whole midichlorian thing, it's kind of been explained that like it's not that like midichlorians like make you strong in the Force. It's more that like when you are more adept to the Force, there's more like midichlorians. But still, but it's still like too much. It's like how we talked about like if they made a movie showing the first ever lightsaber, it just removes some of like the cool mystery about the thing. Yeah, but like. It's kind of the same with the Force, where like Yoda gives the perfect explanation to give us like an understanding of what it is without removing like the mystery and like the veil of like it's kind of a mythical like question mark. And it's so good. And I never as a kid understood the like do or do not, there is no try. Because I was like, well, you gotta try. But like as I've gotten older, it's like, no, but like whether you try or not, at the end of the day, you're doing it or you're not doing it. Yeah. And like, man, that whole sequence, all the Yoda stuff, but especially the like
before, during, and after X-Wing sequence is so good. And it kind of made me realize, like, when people talk about favorite Star Wars characters, like, Yoda's kind of a basic answer, but, like, it is not a bad answer.
No.
Like, it makes sense why he's so good. And, like, obviously Yoda with a lightsaber is cool, but watching this kind of made me go, like, I kind of love that he doesn't, like, he's just in tune with the Force. That's, like...
And he's just, like, a normal, relatively normal person.
Yeah.
He's not any like special jumps 5 feet, spins, jumps back, flips kind of thing like he is in the prequels.
Yeah. Well, because, it shouldn't be explained that he's older, because he's literally like 30 years older, which is like 1/10 of what he's lived.
Yeah.
Like, not even. Anyway, yeah, Yoda's so great. I love him. We'll probably talk about him a little bit in the Return of the Jedi episode as well, but love Yoda.
And then Luke faces Vader.
Luke faces Vader head to head.
In really a classic Star Wars lightsaber battle.
Yeah.
Where it is like we explained in A New Hope, feels dangerous.
Yeah.
There's breaks, there's pauses, there's like kind of planning for next moves, there's like reversals.
Yeah.
Which is just incredible. Like the way Luke's training gets brought up in the fight without being like super obvious about it also.
Yeah.
Where it's like he climbed the rope in his training, but then that lets him during the fight climb up into that thing.
Yeah.
And like get away from Vader, right?
Yeah.
I
and
just
like
think
being kicked down the stairs, he's accustomed to like doing backflips and shit, so he doesn't really just like fall down the stairs.
Yeah.
But like that was a worse example. Yours was way better. But like there is so many moments during the fight. It feels like similarly to in Too Fast, Too Furious, when like Brian is like, we will lose this race, like if we're judging by cars alone.
Yeah.
So we need to pull something out. It's kind of the same here where it's like, obviously Vader wins this.
Yeah.
Luke kind of has to like pull out some like tricks to even stand a chance. Which he like does, but like what I love about the fight is that it like seems like it's close the whole time, and then at the end Luke hits Vader on the shoulder, and within 2 seconds Vader's like, okay, cut your hand off.
Yeah, like it's not even close.
Yeah, like, which then makes you go, was he just toying with him the whole time? Which then watching it back, it's like, yeah, he was barely trying.
Yeah.
And it's not until Luke posed any sort of threat that Vader was like, okay, we're done.
Yeah. The one thing I don't love about the fight is when he falls into the carbonite pit and then does his like really fast jump out of it.
Sure.
It's just kind of like a little jarring.
It's a little goofy. I feel like just like make him jump sooner and have it be like kind of a normal jump.
Because it looks like he's literally flying, which
Yeah.
is not something I don't think that we've seen up until that point.
Well, because like it's so fast that like when I was a kid, I don't even think I noticed it.
Yeah.
I think I was just like, oh, I guess he must have gotten out when I see him climbing the thing. But like, yeah, I think the thing with that is like there are very few times in the like whole saga where Jedi use like force speed of any kind. So like when it's used, it looks a little weird. Like it's used in Phantom Menace, which we'll eventually get to, but then it's kind of never used again.
Yeah.
So it's like when it does happen, it kind of just looks like,
It seems like it's a bit of a cop-out where it's like,
yeah,
they're like, okay, he's now in this hole. We got to get him out of here.
Yeah.
So like now he's, instead of just always using this super powerful thing, he's just going to
even if they
use
just
it now.
slowed it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Just make it like a regular force jump.
Or yeah, like I believe more that you can like force yourself to jump higher and like longer than faster, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you jump and then also like carry yourself with it, that makes a little
Exactly.
more sense to me than like, and now he goes 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Now I literally launch myself through the air.
Yeah.
I agree. That is a little bit goofy, but
That's like the only part of it where I was like, just weird. It's not even bad. It's just like, Oh, okay.
I really like the moment where like they're fighting and then Vader just opts to just like huck microwaves at Luke for a bit, and Luke's like, he's just missing them.
Yeah.
It's like it's a little silly, but I'm just like, it's also kind of brutal because it's just like, I don't know. Obviously, it's dangerous to have someone swing a like blade of plasma at you, but like. It's also kind of worse to just see someone get hit with a big brick of metal.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, like in the whole film, Mark Hamill did all of his stunts except when he gets sucked out of the window. That's the only one he didn't do.
Wait, when does he get sucked out of the window?
It's like right when Vader's like whipping the stuff at him, and then he whips one through the window, and Luke kind of flies through it because there's like suction or whatever.
Okay.
That's the only one he didn't do, but he did all the rest, which is pretty impressive. Anyway, so the fight's pretty good. It's pretty brutal. It's a lot more fast and interesting than the Obi-Wan Vader fight in the first one. And then we get to the end. They're at like the end of this big platform, and above a ginormous hole.
Interesting.
And and then Vader cuts his hand off. Luke's kind of like on this thing.
Last resort.
And then Vader kind of like tries to convince him to join him. Because like earlier in the movie, we see the first appearance of the Emperor via hologram.
He looks like a nutsack, man.
Yeah. Because like you saw, it was like Revenge of the Sith makeup, right? I'm assuming. It was a 2013 Blu-ray? Yeah, then it would have been. So, like, originally, the Emperor in that scene was, like, just, like, I think one of the makeup artists, and they just, like, put some shit around his eyes, and he just kind of talked like this. But then in some of the special editions, I think it was for the DVD re-releases, since they already had Ian McDiarmid for Revenge of the Sith and all the makeup, they were like, let's just put him fix the continuity and put him in here as like whatever. He does look a little bit different than he does in Return of the Jedi, but whatever. At least it's closer.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we see the Emperor, and during like that whole bit, like the Emperor's like, you gotta kill him. And then Vader's like, or we could turn him to the dark side, which like Vader's saying because he's like, we could turn him to the dark side, and then my son and I could kill you and take over the galaxy. But then the Emperor's like, that's a good idea, because the Emperor's like, you're old and a robot, so like I could replace him with your son, who's just younger and stronger at this point.
Yeah.
Or could be younger, or could be stronger. So Vader's trying to convince Luke to join him and take over the galaxy. Luke's like, I would literally never do that. And then he's like, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. And he's like, he told me enough. He told me you killed him. And he says, no, I'm your father.
Is that like the most butchered thing?
Oh, yeah, because people think the line is, Luke, I am your father, which is literally never said. It's, no, I am your father. Which, like, whatever. Like, whatever. But, like, yeah, it's definitely butchered for sure.
It makes more sense out of context to say, Luke, I am your father. Because then it's like, okay, you're talking about Luke Skywalker. If you're just like, no, I am your father, it's just like, okay, is this a secret that you're telling me? What's happening?
Yeah, I think that's probably it, is that, like, it's easier to reference. When you say, Luke, I'm your father, it's like, okay, obviously you're doing Darth Vader, but if you say, I am your father, it's like, what are you doing, fucking Maury Povich?
Let's go.
But in the movie, it makes sense, obviously. And, like, what are your thoughts on Mark Hamill's performance of, no, that's impossible?
I think in general, Mark Hamill's like an okay IRL actor.
Sure. Here's my thing on it. It's goofy a little bit because it's so over the top. But then I think like this man got his hand cut off by him just now. Also, he's pretty sure that his friends might be dead or captured. His options right now are... And
he just found out his dad is one of the worst guys in the galaxy.
He found out his dad is, like, the bad guy. Like, literally space Hitler, basically.
Let's go.
So, like, the reaction is warranted. Doesn't mean it's not a little goofy. Like, there's a lot of movies I've seen where, like, someone has a crying scene, and I'm like, this is, like, pretty brutal. You also look a little silly.
Yeah.
Mostly because, like, when people are crying, they look not great.
Like
That's
idiots.
kind of just the way it is.
But it is, I think, in general, Mark Hamill is, like, an okay actor, but he's, like, a great voice actor.
Oh, yeah. And I think that, as we've discussed, I think he gets better in each original trilogy film. I think he's great in Return of the Jedi. We'll get to.
Well,
But, like, well, we'll get to.
I'm not even sure he's in that one.
But anyways, so that happens, and basically Vader's like, it's true. You know it to be true. And Luke's like, oh, I don't know. But basically Vader's like, you only really have two options right now. It's like, I kill you, or you join me and we fight the Emperor.
And he's like, option three.
Option three is I kill myself.
Yeah.
Which I made a joke to Olivia. I was like, this is literally like the fucking Luke is representing the United States voter. Where it's like, your only two options are to vote for this person or this person. And he's like, actually, I could kill myself instead. Which I thought was...
there it is.
Anyway, I thought it was funny.
Adam's political corner.
That wasn't a political statement. I'm just making a commentary on the...
everyone in every U.S. voter should kill themselves. That's what you just said.
No, I'm just saying like a dual voting system is bad. Anyway, stupid thing to say on a Star Wars podcast. So he flings himself down the hole, somehow lands kind of perfectly into a little slot.
It's the Force.
Yeah, that's kind of...
It's the Force?
Yeah. And then he falls, and then he's like, okay, and then a little thing opens, and he keeps falling. And then he falls, like, onto a fucking, like, satellite antenna that's hanging off the bottom. Which, like, he's got one hand, and he's holding on to that. And even when the Millennium Falcon is, like... I'll get to this in a second. So he basically is reaching out to Ben, and Ben's dead, so, like, silly choice. So he instead reaches out to Leia instinctively. Leia actually... senses his presence through the Force, and they go back and they save him. I like that she's like, we got to go back, and Chewie's like, what? Like, what? Why? And then she's like, we have to go back. Trust me. Like, I feel very strongly that we can go save Luke right now. And Chewie's like, okay. But then Lando's like, what? We're going back to the time. And then Chewie just roars at him. He's like, all right. I just kind of
Chewie does not like Lando.
Which, like, I think they get better as
there it is.
Anyway, they go save
statement.
Luke, open up the little top hatch. But as the Millennium Falcon's approaching, Luke with his one arm is like fucking swinging himself to other sections to like get, I guess, down it. But I'm like, dude, wait until they're below you. Like, you have one hand. Like, you're sweaty and it slips a little bit, you're dead.
Yeah, but he's like so cool.
I guess he's so cool and has the Force, but like, I was just like, I would not do that. I'd be clinging onto it, not moving.
Yeah.
Because like, then you're just falling endlessly into a gas planet. Like, you're dead.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a good sequence. And then he's like talking to Ben through the Force, like, Ben, why didn't you tell me? And all this. Vader reaches out to him one more time, being like, son, don't deny your destiny, basically. And then they move on.
Then Luke gets another hand, and
Luke gets another robot hand, which is pretty cool. I love when he's like moving his fingers and you can see like the shit moving around in his wrist, like little mechanical tendons. They say goodbye to Han and Chewie. There's a nice shot of them like looking out upon a galaxy, which that shot's always confused me a little bit because I'm like, what are you guys looking at? Because they're looking at like a galaxy, but it's like, are you in a galaxy? Aren't you in a galaxy? But
it is kind of weird because
it's kind of just like a nice last shot that doesn't make sense, but like,
yeah.
Anyway,
yeah, I think it's good. Your thoughts?
the movie?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's good. It's incredible. And we haven't really talked about this too much. The practical effects in this movie are incredible.
Yeah.
Like, every explosion, like, is like, like, it's all miniatures. All the explosions of the miniatures are like, they genuinely exploded the miniatures and then just slowed it down so it looked like a bigger explosion. It all looks so good. All the space shots, like, I do think this is also the movie that was the least fucked with as far as like special edition garbage.
Yeah.
So I think, and thank goodness.
There's some annoying. I think I mentioned this at the start, but there's some annoying little droids flying around, and you're
Sure.
like, it's just distracting me.
Yeah.
Like when the stormtroopers are looking for them, there's just like some little fucking droids and like shit. There's just clutter.
Well, that's the thing. It's literally like it's not adding anything. It's literally just distracting.
Yeah.
I'm just glad it happens the least in this movie, but and honestly, some of the changes are good, like with opening Cloud City up a little bit, making it a bit more.
I don't really have any questions. We kind of covered all of the questions I had.
Yeah. Here's what I'll ask. You got to go to Dagobah, or you got to be chased by the Empire and land in a little Exogorth. What do you choose?
Probably the Exogorth.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just like, I'm not really a humidity guy.
It does look it looks cold but humid.
Yeah.
You know? Well, I guess he's really sweaty. So
I
like
think
it's probably
I think
pretty
it's like a
thick and hot.
swamp.
Yeah. My thing with the Dagobah is like he literally has knows nothing about this planet, flies into it, he's flying into trees and shit, and then lands in a little pond swamp lake. And he gets out into the water, and I'm like, you know nothing about like what is lurking and what is here. It's like that would be horrifying to me. But also, actually, I don't know. I guess I'd go Exogorth too, because at least then they go to Cloud City, and Cloud City's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's pretty good. What do you how do you want to do you want to rank it?
Actually, I have one last question that we didn't really address. What did you think of 3PO being like fucking blown up basically at the end?
I think it's kind of funny. And then having like Chewie kind of put him back together and wear him as a backpack.
Yeah,
is
puts him on backwards.
Yeah.
What I like is that he puts him together and like he's using like the wrong language and stuff. And then as soon as he's using English again, you hear him say what he was thinking when he was shot. Mm-hmm. So then like
it's like, oh, stormtroopers.
Yeah. So like all you know is someone destroyed 3PO, and then it's like then we find out the Empire's there, and then we find out like after the fact, like, oh shit, if only we knew that beforehand, kind of thing.
And then when he's back in like current time, he's immediately like, oh, you're an idiot. You put my head on backwards.
Yeah, he's like, he basically calls him useless. But what I love is that like Chewie like laughs, like 3PO's like, you put me on backwards, you idiot, and Chewie's like, and it's like, did you do it on purpose? That's just like mean.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that's like a pretty fun bit, and then the fact that like they have trouble because Lando's people fix the hyperdrive in the Falcon, but then the Empire fucks with it without Lando knowing. So they try to like jump to light speed at the end, and Lando's like, I didn't know. Like Leia and Chewie both look like do a slow turn and look at him, and he's like, "It's not my fault. I trusted them." Blah blah blah. And R2 is putting 3PO back together, and then leaves him to go try and fix the hyperdrive. And 3PO's like, "What? Like your priorities are wrong. You should be putting me back together. You don't know how to fix a hyperdrive. You should be putting me back together." And then R2 puts it back together in a second.
Yeah.
And 3PO's like, "I knew you could do it." And it's like. Like 3PO's just that guy. Anyway, just wanted to briefly. I think 3PO's like a much better comic relief sidekick in this than he is in the first one. Like he's still annoying, but it kind of like works more as because like the characters address him being annoying.
Yeah.
So then it becomes more of a bit than in the first one where it's like he's kind of just a little annoying. Anyway, we can rank now if you'd like. Oh, actually, I want to give my analysis quick.
Okay.
My brief analysis.
All right, your little blurb.
Yeah. I believe that this film explores sacrifice and desperation. Throughout the entire film, our main characters are forced to decide what truly matters to them. Han may say that he wants to leave and doesn't care about the rebellion, but as soon as he's forced to choose, he chooses to protect the people he cares about. Similarly, Luke wants more than anything to become a stronger Jedi and fulfill his potential. However, when he must choose between that or saving his friends, his choice is clear. Whether it is a wise choice or not, they all make choices that are true to them, and they all lose something because of it. Because it's like very much like when it comes down to it, what are you willing to sacrifice for what? And like Han is like just trying to get out of there so he can pay off his debts and not be like captured or killed by Jabba the Hutt. But as soon as it's like the princess is in danger, though, he's like, okay, full focus on like making sure that Leia's okay and we get her out of here.
Yeah.
And that becomes his full focus for basically the whole movie. And then with Luke, he's like, he wants to become a better Jedi more than anything. Oh yeah, and then I guess through doing that, Han loses his freedom because then he's captured and taken to Jabba. Luke, more than anything, wants to become a better Jedi. He starts that process, but then he's like, it's either this or potentially save my friends, which they probably would have been fine if he didn't go, is the thing, which Yoda and Obi-Wan are telling him, but like, it makes sense that he would go save his friends because that's where his priorities lie. But then he loses something because, as we learned in the next movie, he's never really able to complete his training fully. But he also loses his hand. He also loses like a bit of his innocence because he like finds out that his dad is like Hitler, basically. I mean, he's literally referred to as Space Hitler.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, it's clear where the iconography came from for the Empire.
yeah. Anyway, I just think that like the film really explores like loss in this movie and like sacrifice and desperation, because like it's literally just like taking the next chance and then taking the next chance, and like, anyway,
Yeah.
love the film. That's kind of what I gleaned from it.
Well.
Time to rank.
Well.
You go first.
I think it's in the top 5.
Okay.
I think it's above Waves, below Spirited Away.
I think it's number 1.
Why would I put Spirited Away above it? Here's what I'm thinking.
Oh, I thought you were
Did
asking
I break
me, and I
my
was like, I don't know.
brain.
Maybe.
Hold on.
Yeah, take a second.
The reason I think Empire should be below Spirited Away, I don't know.
Okay.
Honestly, I think there's something about like Spirited Away being animated and being its own original like singular thing, whereas this does have the advantage of playing off of the first one.
Sure.
So there's no need to introduce the characters or fully introduce the whole world.
Sure.
Which isn't like a full knock to it, but I think Spirited Away in a way is just as a singular piece of media more perfect to me than the perfect thing that Empire is.
Interesting analysis for sure. This is difficult for me because I love Spirited Away so much. So I'm like arguing against one of my favorite films of all time. That being said, I think that like Empire is like maybe the most perfect film that I've ever seen, mostly because like there's not an aspect of the movie that slips. Like the movie looks incredible, the movie sounds incredible, it like does not stop. It slows down briefly, but like only to like give us more time with these characters, and like the entire film it just feels electric. It feels so vibrant, and it feels like it like it's impossible to look away at any moment because every single moment is like just pulling you towards the screen. And like it's really, yeah, it's like building off of another one, but it is like it's really like enhancing more than anything. Like it's taking the original and being like, that was a good start, but like this is what it is. And it's like really like making a statement of like the first one is kind of like the appetizer, and this is very much the main course. And I don't know, I just truly think there's no movie that has so few flaws and is so consistently good throughout. Like, I don't think there's a lull in the movie. I don't think there's a single point where I'm like taken out of it. Like, maybe like what you said, where you hear a line that's been referenced a lot, but that's not the fault of the film at all.
No. And that's not even like what I'm.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I was just more saying,
Okay.
like, that's the only kind of thing that I can think about where you're, like, taken out of it.
Okay.
But, like, that's not the fault of the film. That's just because it's so good. It's been talked about so much. But, yeah, I'd say, like, to me, Empire is, like, not only a film that, like, set a precedent for other films, but, like, so many films draw from it as, like, this is kind of, like, a masterclass in pacing, in writing, in character development, in character relationship, and like stakes. Because like the stakes in this movie, the stakes in the first movie are, if we don't win, the Empire will blow up all the planets they don't like. The stakes in like Return of the Jedi are like, this is truly our last chance, but like otherwise the Empire will gain ultimate power. The stakes in Empire are just like, we're worried for our heroes.
Yeah.
And like, it's kind of like the perfect example of like, big stakes don't necessarily mean good stakes. Like, good stakes are ones that you are invested in and care about. And this movie is like so many little stakes, but they're very deep personal stakes that you kind of care about the entire time. And like, it feels like you can lose at any time. And the heroes do lose multiple times. In fact, pretty consistently. Like, they lose on Hoth. They, like, get chased by the Empire. They get caught. Luke loses a hand. He loses, Yoda literally tells him he failed his training. Like, it's like, and Han gets captured. Like, it's kind of just, like, constant losing, but it still maintains the fun spirit of the first one. I just think it's a perfect film. Spirited Away, I love so much, and I think is like one of my favorite like isolated films where it's like it just is what it is. But I don't think it quite reaches like the heights of Empire Strikes Back.
Okay, here's the thing.
Okay.
I'll give it to you because I know next week we got one replacing it. We got one replacing
Oh,
it. I wonder if you know how they live in Tokyo.
do you feel okay putting Empire
I
above
do.
Spirited Away?
I think part of me is just like, I don't want to move, just put one at number one because it is such a rare thing that we've done.
Yeah. Here's the thing, because like we'll get into it in that episode, but like I like Return of the Jedi more than Empire. Like, just from a personal standpoint, I know it's not going that high. And, like, I also know none of the other Star Wars movies are going that high.
Come on.
Solo's so good.
And, like, Tokyo Drift is going to take number one next week.
Fair.
So that's why I'm kind of okay with this. Because it's like, it will be corrected.
Sure. I just feel like, and this is what I'll say also. Like, I think a lot of people, like, sometimes dismiss Empire because it's like a Star Wars movie, but it's like I encourage people to like watch it again, like probably watch A New Hope first, but like watch Empire again. It is like every time I watch it, I'm surprised by how good it is. Like I always go in being like, I know it's like really good, but like, and then I watch it and I'm like, oh, it's like genuinely one of the greatest films ever made.
Yeah.
You're okay with it?
I think so. I think it's just, oh, you fucked it up, I think.
It'll fix, I think.
No, it won't. He's ruined the list.
Oh, wait.
We've got two number ones.
Oh, no, it just fixed it. Yeah, it just fixed it.
Wow. That was kind of tense for a second there. Incredible.
It really was.
Maybe you outro the show instead of just typing it in because they don't care about you typing it in.
I mean, I just finished typing it in. It does feel weird to see Spirited Away not at the top.
Yeah, it's kind of sickening. I'm going to throw up.
But, it's fine. All right, so that actually...
That's not necessary.
That concludes this episode. Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, sitting at number 1 on our list, which... Crazy shit. Right above...
All right.
Right above Spirited Away at number 2. Obviously, like, I mean, this doesn't really need to be said, but obviously, like, having a new number 1 is no knock to the movies below it. Waves has been at number 1 and deserved it. Spirited Away has been at number 1 and deserved it.
What else was number 1? Harry Potter?
Harry Potter was at number 1 and deserved it.
Well, not really.
Deserved it at the time.
Jacob doesn't touch it.
So that's it. Empire Strikes Back at number 1 on the list.
Wow.
Next week, we'll be talking about Need for Speed Tokyo Drift, which
Sorry?
allegedly...
What did you say?
Did I say Need for Speed Tokyo Drift?
Oh my fucking
Fast and Furious
God.
Tokyo Drift next week, which allegedly will take the number 1 spot. We'll see if that actually happens.
Allegedly, you're the biggest scumbag on the pod.
It's a tough competition there. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for watching. If you watched on YouTube, obviously the episode's available on YouTube and on your podcatcher of choice. We appreciate you listening. If you're on Spotify, there's a little question. You can answer what you think of the film.
And the question's going to be, who's the thickest in the movie?
It's not. Is it going to be that?
I don't know.
I
You do
don't
the
know if I'm going to
podcast
remember
stuff.
to do that question.
That's fine.
We'll see. And I don't want to ask who's the thickest in the movie. What would your answer be?
Wombat.
Wombat.
What's the snow boy?
Wampa?
Yeah.
Actually,
Wampa.
he's probably the thickest
Wampa
boy.
Wampa.
We'll get the real thickest boy in the next Star Wars movie. Jabba.
Oh, that's so true.
All right.
Such a hot
Thanks
young
everybody
man.
for listening and watching. We appreciate you. We love you. We'll catch you next time.
Bye bye.